because it's a little delayed over there on the Facebook. All right, guys. Hey, it's Arden's Chats in the afternoon. What do you think about that, Meka?
I'm thinking it's great.
This is my friend Meka, who's I've known a very long time, and is probably the least shocked that I have a giant pink Kent Youngstrom art behind me permanently now.
What else would you have behind you?
Oh, so my friend Kent is like super famous. He was in what's that, Chip and Joanna? He's at the farm, whatever, the silos, and he was in the back.
Silos. I've been to the silos.
Wow, good for you.
Now that I'm a
Kent.
Texan, it's like a rite of passage.
Oh, you got to go to the silos. Well, Kent is very dark and stormy and moody. He says he's not the tortured kind of artist, but I think he is. So when he painted this big pink thing, I knew it was made for me. All right, guys. So this is Arden McLaughlin over here on Arden's Chats. Today we are going live. I'm trying to pull it up on my feeds. Oh, there you guys are. We are going live because I want to talk about some issues that I have seen happening. And Meka has been so gracious. I don't know if we're live yet, Meka, so we might just have to, it's preparing. So we're just going to keep going until it goes. Meka, as you're watching on Arden's Chats too, has been so gracious to answer some questions for me and be honest about what's going on in our specifically Black communities. So several of my friends have been talking about this. I watched For a Blip, the One World program, and Beyonce talked about it. And I am white, which we've determined here on Arden's Chats as I talk to people outside my race that I am in fact white. So this is not something I know anything about, but I love to open up the opportunity so my audience, which I hope wants to learn and wants to hear, like, how can we help? What can I do? What's the issue? And not make judgmental comments or prejudiced comments or whatever it is. So I just want to know. And Meka and I were chatting last week, catching up, and she said she'd go forth with this. So I love it. And Meka, tell the people who you are. You've already told them you're in Texas.
I am.
She's a cowgirl and works at the...
No, I am not a cowgirl. I am a Texan purely by geography. I am from the Northeast, the great state of Massachusetts, a proud Bostonian at that. But I will say, what's happening with COVID in the Northeast is really, shocking and heartbreaking. And living in Texas, and while it is as sensitive of a topic here as it is anywhere, I think just because of the lack of concentration of people and the ways that there are in the Northeast, coupled with public transportation, we haven't seen quite as robust of some of the challenges that our brethren up there have experienced. And so, and you just have a bigger footprint, the yard, and, it's 85 degrees today. And so you can kind of do some of those things that you just might not be able to do if you're, in New York City or Boston or what have you. So
yeah, to just kind of get out a little bit. So what brought you to what do you do in Texas? And then we're just going to get into it.
I've spent most of my career in sports and entertainment, and that's team side, league side, tech, which I'm in now as a chief revenue officer of a company that does, interestingly, a cashless payment service. And so what's funny is, as I've explored, sports and entertainment for years, and how that business is going to evolve over time, it's been interesting, when you're talking to teams and leagues about going cashless, and how I think we all felt as though that was something coming, as much like ticketless travel. I think 20 years ago, if you'd have told any of us that we'd go to the airport without any form of paper in our hand and just use your phone to get on a plane, we'd have told you were crazy. And now, if I had to keep up with a ticket, I don't know that I would be able to do it. And so I think the world's moving in that direction too, as it relates to paying for things. I mean, the notion that you need to pull out a card or cash is, I think, subsiding, and people want the opportunity to pay cashlessly especially given what's going on with COVID. I mean, nobody wants to touch anything. I was in a retailer last week, and the dreaded keypad with that like weird pin that's like connected, and I'm like, I just cannot touch that. And I think that's really when you talk about, you know, things going back to normal. While I don't think normal will ever be what happens, this new normal, I think includes some form of cashless experience across the board, whether you're at the movies or whether you're at, you know, a Tar Heels game or whether you're at the grocery store. I think you need to have the opportunity to, you know, the option to not have to pull out cash or cards. And so that's really what I'm working on now.
She's smart. She knows where the world's going. So, Meka, what we want to talk about is kind of, I'm not going to dive too much into your background, but I want to know why you even, like, you clearly are a successful woman. And I think it could be, why do you care what's going on in the rural areas? You don't live in the rural area. You come from the city, and some of our areas that are people that are suffering, that we're just not. And I say this because I keep getting very frustrated. I got live on my platforms today, and I'm really tired of seeing people that say comments like, oh, it hasn't happened to me, so I'm fine. Or, oh, we have to get back to business. Well, we do, but there's actually been a lot of people who have had to go about their business anyway.
Yeah.
They are not doing great, and it's hurtful.
Yeah.
And I want, as best I can, to help address it and help educate as to what's going on. So why do you even have a passion for this as a
Well, I just feel like, you know, look, it's just because something isn't your plight doesn't mean you can't have a sensitivity and appreciation for someone else's experience. You know, look, I mean, I haven't personally had COVID-19, but I do know people in my family who have had it and have survived it, and all is well. But, you know, conversely, I know people who've gotten it and haven't survived it. And so with that being said, while, you know, I may be of the population of people who could encounter COVID and either A, be asymptomatic, or B, recover, that doesn't mean that I don't care about the people who are, you know, not me. And I think it can be seen as incredibly selfish to only be concerned about your own specific needs and what only affects you. Because trust me, the goings on of others, while it may not affect your day to day, will affect you in the long term, in one way or another. And so to not sort of understand that and be sensitive to it and do your part, it's like, yeah, okay, maybe this person is susceptible to getting sick and I'm not, so therefore I don't care, and I'm just going to go about my day. And I don't really care if I encounter somebody else who is, you know, potentially at risk, is, I think, unfair and super short-sighted. And I think we just gotta open our eyes and recognize that we are all a part of the same community and need to support one another as best we can. And while not infringing upon our own sort of civil liberties and rights and abilities to do the things that we need, but you can't do it blind to how it affects others.
Right. I love that. And I sent you an article yesterday that a local press did here, but I think what really had me start to think about this was, I was talking to my mom and she was like, did you see the story about the bus driver? And I was like, no. And a bus driver is, I get, in Charlotte, just doing his job. He's an essential worker. Someone gets on, sneezes all over him. He is a carrier. He ends up dying from COVID. And so many of our essential employees, you're working at a food place. My dad's considered an essential employee. He works at his store a little bit. A lot of our people are considered essential employees that don't have cars, or don't have housing, and they're all on public transportation. And these folks are being infected. And that's when I started going, there's got to be a bigger answer. There's got to be something that I understand. I'm frustrated I can't go to the park. I've lost business too. I certainly haven't gotten any extra money from the government, but I'm also alive. And I just, is there, like, tell me about this. Like the food deserts, what we were talking about last week, that a lot of times, well, we don't realize, especially in metropolises or in areas where we have 3 or 4 grocery stores within a mile, that not everyone has that. So
yeah, look, I think that the crux of it all is when you boil it down, as almost everything in this country, it's a socioeconomic issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the end of the day, we can talk about people who are predisposed to certain conditions being more susceptible to COVID, or people of a particular age. But let's be clear, the people with the most propensity to have a pre-existing condition are people who are in the lower economic class in this country,
Yeah.
because they don't have the ability to continue to have continued care. They don't have the ability to go to the doctor. While I think a lot of people are insured, there's a heck of a lot of Americans that aren't, and even if they are, a $20 copay may not be something that they can afford. And so now I've got something that I don't know that I have, or I know that I have and I can't take care of it. And now I encounter COVID, and as a healthy American who has the resources to make sure that they remain healthy, may get COVID, get sick, shake it off and move on.
Mm-hmm.
Me, because I don't have the money to get continued care, I can't go to get my annual checkups. I am not able to get, my every 6-month teeth cleaning, whatever it is. I encounter COVID, but don't know that I already have all of these other things. And now I am in a desperate situation because of this matter. And so I guess my question becomes, if it truly falls largely, the death rate falls largely on the disadvantaged, then it becomes, how do we get better at supporting the disadvantaged? Then
Yeah.
how do we stop the spread of COVID?
Right.
Because I think there is a chance that we can mitigate the spread, and we can all do our part to wash our hands and do some of these other things. But in the end of the day, the realities are that some people in this country don't have the same opportunities as others to care for themselves, and they don't really have a way out of it. So I just, it's really unfortunate.
Yeah.
And like you said, in rural parts of this country, grocery stores aren't readily available. Hospitals aren't readily available.
Mm-hmm.
And, if this gets into a community like that and spreads like wildfire before people are able to actually get to a hospital or what have you, it just exacerbates the issue.
Yeah.
And so I think in New York, it's largely a minority issue, but it's not about race. It's about economics, in my opinion.
Because I keep seeing, and we can dive into this too, like it's killing, and that's why I asked you last week. I was like, it's killing our Black community twice as much as any other community. And I don't understand why we're not addressing it, or if does my DNA as a white person react differently than your DNA as a Black person to the medicine or whatever it is? And and this is something I don't know. And is there something that we should address, that we need to know? Like, what do I need to know?
So I don't think it has anything to do with DNA. I think it has everything to do with it's affecting minorities disproportionately than white people, because minorities are disproportionately disadvantaged more than white people. Like I think that's what it boils down to. I mean, when you look at disease that are a function of advantage. Sorry, there's another dog barking, so my dog's deciding to bark too.
Tyson, he misses me. That's what it is. Tyson misses me.
When you look at a population who is largely disadvantaged, hold on one second. I'm back.
Bring you back. I'm listening. And I'm
so
asking questions that I think I'll get.
So when you look at a population that is just disadvantaged by percentage at a greater rate than another, if anything impacts that community, it's that community's ability to mitigate that impact is disadvantaged.
Yeah.
Like by the weight with which they're disadvantaged to begin with. So, and when you're talking about money in particular or education, like they are readily able to go to hospitals. By the way, in those communities, the best hospitals aren't in those communities. So if you're the best doctor in the world, you're not trying to go to the worst neighborhood and practice medicine.
No.
So you're getting, the sort of leftovers in every regard in the community that really needs the best because they don't have the resource to support themselves in the ways that, communities with resource do. And if you look at a map of New York City in particular and look at the hot zones, it is Harlem, it's Spanish Harlem, it's Queens, it's Brooklyn. It's not the Upper East Side, it's not the Upper West Side, it's not Tribeca, it's not Battery Park, where all of the wealthy people live, or Westchester, Connecticut, or it's not those areas that are being affected the most. It's the places where people are poor. And so for me, it's, if you're in one of those communities, it's like you don't have money, you don't have the best housing, you don't have the best food options. Make no mistake that the healthiest food in this country is by far the most expensive. So I can't afford to buy organic, and I can't afford to buy the best produce and make things fresh when I'm feeding X number of kids or in this particular situation. So it just compounds itself to a place where now introduced pandemic, it's going to impact that community more than it's going to impact another.
So that's what I think. Okay, so that's what I think is what, for me, this time, what have we been 5 or 6 weeks at home now, has really, and I've been trying to reflect on this and looking and going, I believe everything happens for a reason. A lot of this is bad. There's been some, for me personally, some great things have come out of it. But I keep thinking some of the biggest things coming out of this are we're more aware, we're on an even playing field. It's seemingly an even playing field because most people are out of work and you have every opportunity. That's what everyone in my economic, socio, whatever talks about. It's all equal now. It's all equal now. And all I keep seeing is, but I saw some people from a hotel get kicked out the other day. I am really worried about these kids that now we're not in school forever. And all of these very big issues are starting to come forward and they're starting to percolate up. And I'm wondering, is this a time for us to really start recognizing that we as a country, if we're looking at, I keep talking about this is a humanity issue. COVID-19 is not a political issue. The political figures, the House, the Senate, all the things are going to do what they do, right? They're going to argue with each other and they're going to fight for their own and whatever it is. But this is a humanity issue. And every day you have the option to walk in a door and be kind to someone, to go, one of my friends is we're doing terrible at school, but we're doing a really good job of teaching. We're taking food to the homeless. And now I'm educating my children about what homelessness actually looks like. And they're talking to them and having conversations and going, you're not somebody scary. You're just in a different situation than I am. I would love to see our communities that really need us, these food deserts, these schools where they don't have internet or their books aren't great or whatever it is, healthcare, whatever it is, how can we, you're way more educated on this stuff than I am. What can we start doing? Is there?
Well, I think it starts with just day one is recognizing that everybody's circumstances aren't the same. And that is not necessarily because some people choose it. Let's be clear. There are some people making some real poor choices out here. No doubt about it. And that is irregardless of race, creed, whatever. You're just making a bad decision. But make no mistake, there is a population of people who start the race at a disadvantaged place. Like everybody isn't starting this race from the same place. And so your opportunity to sort of succeed is mitigated by the fact that you have to run twice as hard to meet me at the same finish line because I started the race well beyond where you started. And so I think first and foremost, it's people stepping outside of themselves and saying, yes, this is my situation, but I can recognize that my person across town is dealing with this, but their starting place is something very different than mine. For example, I work in an industry where I still can work from home and get a paycheck and choose to stay in. If you are working as a service provider in the food industry, your situation is not the same as mine. If you don't go to work and in some cases risk your life to do it, you can't make a paycheck. So how can I say, okay, well, maybe this part doesn't affect me, but it affects this person. So what can I do to support that from where I sit? And is that giving of my time? Is that giving of my resource? You know, you think about disadvantaged communities where parents rely on the school lunch program, and that makes up the breakfast and lunch for thousands of kids in this country with parents who can't afford to provide those meals. Now, not only not working, not getting that assistance and not being able to feed them, their kids or themselves. Like, how can you support that? And that doesn't mean that that parent's a bad person. That doesn't mean that they don't love their children. That doesn't mean that they're not doing everything that they can. That means that what they do for a living and the place that they started out this race is something very different than mine. Mm-hmm. And so as opposed to sit back in judgment, that doesn't help nobody. It doesn't help me. It doesn't help them. Even if you think it's total BS that they're in the position they're in, that still doesn't help the situation whatsoever. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I'm not willing to hear, you know, and I say this to people on my team all the time. If you have the audacity to step up and have an opinion about something or have a criticism about something, you ought to have had the responsibility to think about a solution and how you can help. And so for me, it's if you're going to raise an issue, raise a solution along with it. But we don't get to sit back and point fingers and complain and then go in our hole and not do anything to sort of help. And so I think we all have different gifts. We all have different skills. We all bring something different to the table. So use your gifts for something positive and step outside of yourself to support somebody else.
Yeah, I love that. And I wanted it to be heard from, I'm trying to hear that from a lot of different people. I had someone on the other day who's working and she provides tech. These kids come into a camp every day for 2 hours and they learn some kind of tech STEM thing. And I said, well, that's great for the parent that can afford the $50 because, you know, it's $50 for 2 hours, $50 for a week, right? Like, that's awesome. And most of our students here were able to go get laptops and everything they needed from schools, and then internet has like blown up. But I was like, what about the kids that can't? She was like, oh, we have tons of sponsorships. So I was like, done. $50, I can sponsor a kid. Like, I love that. Like, it gives you something for these parents to have 2 hours by themselves if they need to be working or doing whatever. And it gives these kids 2 hours of like time that I know I sure as heck couldn't be teaching a kid right now. And so it gives them something like that. And I love like looking for opportunities to be providing.
Yeah. And that is what's so interesting about that example is for most people, you know, I shouldn't say that's not the right word. For I'm sure a lot of our contemporaries, because let's be frank, you hang out with people who operate in the same social economic climate that you're in. So like your baseline for understanding is really the people that you surround yourself with, and mostly you're surrounding yourself with people like you. That's why a lot of people are like, you know, well, I got my white friend, so therefore I know everything about white people. It's like, because that one person, like that doesn't like check a box. Like that doesn't mean you get it. So setting that aside, the people who need, like in that example you just said, the most are the kids who can't afford it.
Right.
You know, and so it's funny, it's like the people you sponsor for programs like school lunch or a tech workshop program like you described are the kids that actually need it the
Yeah.
most. The kids who can afford it are kids who probably already are fairly tech savvy and
Yeah.
have their parents have disposable income by which to support them. So
Yeah.
it's just really trying to understand, you know, and I think if we all took a step back and recognize that there's people who are running the same race we're running with a completely different advantage point. And
Yeah.
you just got to appreciate that and try to figure out how you support them, sort of bolstering their race in this thing we call life to give them the best chance to succeed.
Yeah. I love that. That's a great way to end. Is there anything you guys are doing in particular? How's Texas looking these days?
So Texas is good. Like I said, I think it's an environment that, you know, because there's space and because, you know, people you know, aren't taking public transportation, the sort of communicability of this virus isn't as robust. I think the same as others. I mean, if you look at the underprivileged, I mean, they're seeing a greater rate of cases and certainly deaths in sort of privileged environments. But I think largely for a state of 29 million people, we've had about 17,000 cases and 300 deaths, which
Yeah.
in a state this large is pretty small compared to, you know, New York and some of the others.
Right.
But I do think we still need to do our part to protect people. If you can't stay home, do. If you need to go out, do so with caution. Recognize that there's other people out there who may not have the choice you have to stay home, and like appreciate the gift that God's given you that you have that choice. So don't try to go out because you can, and this person who has to be at this grocery store can't make a different choice. And now you're exposing them in if they had a different option, they would take it.
Yeah.
And so for those of us that have options, I just encourage people to, you know, what would you do if it was, you know, your mom or your grandmother or whomever who's at, you know, this coffee shop or this store or what have you, and they are susceptible to this virus, and you could be staying at home and you're choosing consciously not to because you don't feel like it.
Right. I've seen so much of that. Like, it's not going to be, I'm like, I know it is not easy. Although I will be honest, I've embraced my hermit status. I think everyone's a little worried about me. They're like, how many days has it been? I'm like, I don't know. I'm living life right over here. But I think that's just a great message. Like I told everyone I started Arden's chats to really introduce you all to the vast number of people that I know, but to also really start to spark really conversations we need to have. Meka and I have had hard conversations, and I've learned a ton. And look, hopefully she's learned a thing or two from me too, but you cannot work out in this world, be an effective human being, without having open and honest conversations. And I
100%.
like,
and also having mutual respect for different opinions, right? Like the way I feel is a function of who I am, how I grew up, and my experiences. The way you feel is equally a function of who you are, who you know, what you've experienced.
Yeah.
Appreciate my differences, but recognize I can never see the world through your eyes because I didn't live and walk in your shoes. And neither can you see it through mine. And so if people had a bit more compassion for, while I may feel differently, I can appreciate the fact that I can't see your perspective. It's impossible for me to see your perspective.
Yeah.
And vice versa. And so like just sort of recognize that and appreciate it. Don't try to force your opinion on me. I'm not you. I didn't live your life. I didn't walk in your shoes. I don't know how it feels to be you. I can't water down how you feel about this situation, just like you can't water down how I feel about that situation. We're put here to try to understand one another and then love on each other despite the differences.
Love that. And I think like that's really one of the other big lessons I wish could come out of COVID is we don't know, but we've been forced to look at ourselves. We've been forced to be inside a lot and to figure out and to go, I wake up, like I go, oh my, I don't know what it would be like to not be able to, I'm not getting any kind of money from the government. I'm out of work. I don't have anything. I do not know what that's like, right?
Yeah, or like being a
Mentor.
single mom. Like think
Yeah,
about,
not that.
you know, you were married, you had 4 kids, all of a sudden he leaves,
Yeah,
and now
we
you
don't
have four
know.
kids, they all are in school, aka you're the teacher, you have a job,
Yeah,
you're not working anymore. I mean, like, listen, we're all 2, 3 decisions away from being in a really different place. Like, if
yeah,
a few things happen in succession, your whole situation could change. And so, like, what I don't want people to do is take exceptions and make them the rule. Meaning, yes, there are people in every community, every race on this planet who manipulate rules, who aren't doing their part, who aren't trying, who aren't, you know, doing what they can do to be better contributors to society. But that isn't the majority. That's the minority. And I think people take those people who are let's be clear, the ones that make the news are the ones that are the minority, because that's the interesting stuff.
yeah,
No one wants to hear about the person who does the right thing all the time. So what you do is you see that what's on TV, which is the vast minority, and you
yeah,
extrapolate that across an entire race of people, which is like the most short-sighted thing you could ever do. And then you say, well, those people don't do this and those people don't do that. And it's like, well, it's not quite right.
right.
And I just think we got to have a lot more sensitivity for one another. We've got to look back, and I say this to people all the time. COVID is a moment in time.
Mm.
And if we're all blessed to live till we're 80 years old, we're going to talk about the 2020 year of COVID and Kobe and whatever else we're reminded of that year. But it's a blip in time.
Yeah,
And I don't want people to waste this time worrying about all the things they can't do and not
mm,
maximizing this time for all the things that they can do. Because I
yeah,
think a lot of us prayed to slow down, prayed to have time to be introspective, prayed to have time to build that business plan or start that business or start that Bible study or work on time with our kids or get in shape or eat healthier or whatever those things are, and don't miss it.
yeah.
Because I guarantee you in
Girl,
about
you
30
preaching
days,
now.
we're going to be back into life and its new normal. And we're going to look back around Christmas and be like, shoot, I should have done this. I should have painted that room I wanted. I should have tried that new thing. I should have,
Yeah,
I should have, I should have, I should have. And you can't get this time back. And so
no,
I think when you started this off and said, I woke up and I'm healthy and I've got a roof over my head and food in my refrigerator, the rest is just semantics.
yeah. Girl, that's good. We gotta go because these people they got too much on them now. All right, y'all. Find Meka on the Instagram. Tell her how great she is at Mrs. Meka Morris. She the best. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.